And this is Art History 497X, and this is the last video for May 8th, the lesson that you're doing. So you hopefully, if you've kept up with everything, you've now got your creature completely interactive, and that is great. And as you click around, in this case, we can make different things happen. And for the final bit, all you're really doing is playing around with color. And that's just, I really want to stress that that is just me wanting you to start to think about different ways that you can use the structures that we've worked with so far to create, different kinds of effects. You're basically running coding experiments right now, and every time you run an experiment, you learn something different. So there are different commands besides the ones we've gone over in the interactivity section that you've read so far. One of them is, for instance, the ability to generate random numbers. That's very, very helpful as well. And you can make random numbers with a limit to a certain number. For instance, you could do a random number to 255, and that would run through values that would be helpful for color. So you can play around with all sorts of things. You can also use mouse X and mouse Y to help create colors. Now, in our case, we've got a size of our paper here is 400. So if we mouse X and mouse Y around here, sometimes we're going to have 400 as our value. And maybe that's not what we want, right? Maybe we don't want our paper to only be 255 pixels large. So what I'm looking for in cases like that is for you to somehow deal with the fact that if you're going to use a mouse X, mouse Y command, that you get numbers that sort of make sense. You don't want basically to in an entire area of your screen, which would be sort of this area, for your values to just be 255 all the time, right? So if you're wanting to use mouse to input color, that's one way you can play around. You can also do if loops. You can limit out. If you remember from our previous, working in JavaScript, a lot of that stuff still works. So within this loop right here, you can do if commands as well. So you can say, if a certain color reaches, 255, then make that variable basically 0 again, right? So you can iterate a value and up to a point, and then tell it to if x ever equals, well, that's a bad FC, we'll say, because we don't want to use x because that's already talking about a position. So if c, since we're playing with color, if you declare an integer value c, and you say that that equals mouse x, but you don't want mouse X to be above 255, then, for instance, then you can say if it's above 255, select a different number, or if it's above 255, take mouse X minus 255, since we know we're at 400. But anyway, you think through that, because always imagine that you want these things to be sort of self-relational, right? So using mouse X for color can get a little bit complicated that way, but I think it's a great challenge. And basically, you can, anywhere there's a number. So for instance, let's just do something stupid here. And I really want you, I'm not going to really do too much for this exercise. I'm just kind of explaining things because I really want you to experiment. I want to see what kind of logical structures come up for you. What kind of questions, as you're doing this, ooh, what if I did that? What if I did this? I want to see you play around and sort of show me what you've got at this point. But, just something sort of silly here, just to show you what some kinds of interactions are. If we say we want the fill to be mouse X, let's see what happens with that. So we'll hit stop and go. So that's pretty interesting, right? Notice when I'm over here in the 400 range, I basically go to a transparent color, and that's why suddenly I can see the full circles, right? So you can see how we're getting a certain kind of interactivity, but it's sort of an interactivity that's not very, it's not very smart, but you do start to see that even this interactivity starts to tell you things. Like let's see what happens if we move background. Let's see if we can get a continuous so we can sort of see the progression. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like do something in your code and then that'll bring up a question, just like it did for me. Like what if maybe we can make it more apparent if we leave these guys around, we can start to see that pattern a little bit better. Look how we go to white and then we go to transparent. So we've just located, where those numbers sort of trip over for us. Isn't that interesting? You can start to see, because we've made the fill reliant on the x value. Remember, x is just this axis. So it doesn't matter where we click here, it looks exactly the same. But things look very different as we move this direction. So it starts to sort of ingrain those understandings, and that's really important. And the best coders, basically, they just sort of get these understandings become intuitive, and they start to be able to play with it the same way that some of you, for instance, might really know how to play with a pencil to get certain shades or certain effects, or for others of you who maybe aren't in the studio arts, maybe you have this ability with language and you know how to make words sort of shade meanings in certain ways. It's an intuitive understanding. You might not be intentionally thinking through, oh, if I use this word, it means this. It's just something that's tied to your understanding of language, and it's a skill that you have. Coding is just like that, and by running these little experiments, you learn about what the coding environment really tells you. And so I would love to see what you can, show me the best you can come up with, show me if you can throw some loops in there, some sort of if loops, that's great. I'd love to see, if or if else. It should work within this environment. And if you're having any trouble with it at all, you can always go to processing.org, and we will be online here. I'll be starting the class in about 10 minutes. And so we'll be online and we can sort of troubleshoot problems like that together. Okay, so I hope you've gotten a good orientation. So for the assignment, what I'm expecting under that assignment 3-4 is to see two separate scripts from you. One is just the mouse interactivity, and then the culmination is this 4 where you're really playing in your interactivity. Playing with color, playing with the way the screen is regenerating, playing with whether you're interacting with mouse clicks, etc. So looking forward to seeing what you create, and after we're finished up here, I guess I'll see you in the classroom environment in 10 minutes, or if I don't see you there, I'll see you on Monday. Readings are up for Monday, so you should be able to find those on your calendar, and I'll talk to you later.